Hey everyone, Joe Waxman here. And in this video, I want to look at the chart of Dolores Cannon. Now, she's not as famous as some other people I've done, but she is worth talking about. Guys, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you have not already. Dolores Cannon. Believe it or not, she's not in Wikipedia. So I'm just going to her website and pulling up her life. And she's very important, in my opinion, to know about, especially if you're into more metaphysical stuff, things like that. So bear with me. I'm just going to try and read through some of this. So she was born, all right. St. Louis, Missouri, grew up with her family, blah, blah, blah. She married her husband, career U.S. naval man, with whom she spent the next 21 years traveling all over the world to accommodate various overseas missions. She raised her family, typical Navy wife, through the 50s and 60s, until several major events changed her life. Dolores and Johnny were using simple hypnosis for habits, stop smoking, lose weight. Dolores was first introduced to reincarnation in 1968. One of the patients, they hypnotized one of the patients. The woman suffered from nervous eating disorder, was extremely obese, had high blood pressure, and suffered from kidney problems. And they thought hypnosis would help. Midway through the session, the woman unexpectedly began describing scenes from a past life where she was a flapper. I don't know what that is. Living in Chicago in the roaring 20s. They watched this woman literally transformed into a different personality with different vocal patterns, despite being highly strange and completely inexplicable. They decided to go with it and see what they could find out. Over the next several months, Dolores and Johnny regressed the woman through 5 different distinct lifetimes back to when she was created by God. The entire story of this event is told in the first book Dolores ever wrote, Five Lives Remembered, in 2009. And this was revolutionary. It was unheard of, and never happened before. And because I'll just a little background because I know about this. Most hypnosis does not go full somnambulistic. It's called full somnambulation. They don't go all the way deep into hypnosis because that's when like spooky, scary things happen that most hypnotists do not want to be involved with. But her technique goes into full somnambulist hypnosis. That's the deepest level of hypnosis. Okay. Let's see. So later that same year, her husband was almost killed by a drunk driver in a horrendous automobile accident on his way to the naval base. As a result of his injuries, being confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life as a partial amputee. They relocated to the hills of Arkansas, where they thought they'd be able to afford a living on multiple pension with their 4 children. During this time, Dolores' exploration and hypnosis took a back seat, and she focused on her husband and raising her children. Once her children had grown, she could do hypnosis full time in the 70s. And she attracted a clientele, and her early work was heavily focused on reincarnation. And she brought many, many clients back into past lives, even past millennia. Bear with me, I'm just gonna, oops. I just need to scan through this, kind of get the important parts. So she did that for a while. Her early understanding of reincarnation was rather simplistic, and she received a lot of information. They were starting to slowly lay the foundation upon which she would understand, communicate, and explain far more challenging and complex ideas and concepts she would be receiving in the future. So she developed a technique called the quantum healing hypnosis technique. Having conducted sessions with thousands of clients, that's a lot, recording the same results time and time again and spending vast amounts of time and energy verifying the authenticity of her clients' past lives, Dolores was able to decisively conclude that her results were indeed genuine, and she had tapped into an incredibly powerful source of information. By the way, guys, her technique is taught still to this day, and many people have had similar and validating results that indeed, who can indeed confirm this technique works and that past lives, they're confirming, they're all confirming, you know, you regress thousands of people and they're all telling you similar things independently that confirm the information. It starts to become very credible, right? I don't like to talk about past lives when people are just like, you get a lot of like kooky stuff, especially in astrology. This means that about your past life. That means this about your past life. I had one astrology reading where this woman proceeded to tell me all about my past life. I'm like, how do you know any of this? I didn't ask her that, but that's what I think. And it's just, she doesn't, she's making it up. But this is real, like, because it's secondhand, well, it's secondhand from the person, but it's experiential. And then when, you know, you get thousands of people saying very similar things, it's very validating. And not just from Dolores, but people after her who've also learned the technique, you know, getting the same results. Dolores eventually realized that the memories of past lives and additional information she was receiving through clients were being supplied by a much larger, more powerful, and more knowledgeable portion of her clients' selves, which their conscious minds were completely unaware existed. She decided to label it the subconscious as part of every person's mind that absolutely exists. So this is way deep. This is like moving into like God consciousness. You know, the further you go back into our individual consciousness, it's more unified into the ocean of consciousness that is one. And that's completely real. I mean, this is like, if you listen to other spirituality things, not religion, because religion is, anyway, not religion, spiritual, real spiritual stuff. They confirm this. Most religion is about power and control and has nothing to do with the truth. Most of it. I'm not saying you can't have elements of religion that are true, but anyway. When contact and communicate with, there is simply no question cannot answer about an individual's current life or about any of their past lives. I do know that sometimes this subconscious or whatever voice is coming through will not reveal certain details because they don't want the person to know. Not that they don't want the person to know, but it would mess up their life path if they know something that's going to happen, right? If you know your destiny, you're not supposed to know all your destiny. Sometimes they can reveal things, sometimes they can't. And I know that because I've studied this. And she boiled down her technique to what really works. She did work. She brought people back into Jesus and the Essenes, where Jesus was taught by the Essenes, and she set up her own publishing company because this was too weird for any other most other publishing companies. They didn't want anything to do with it. Dolores was able to take back. So she found a client who could go back 25 separate lifetimes. Each personality was distinct. She went back to Hiroshima, which describes a man who has experienced the Hiroshima bomb, atomic bomb dropping. She describes the life of a young man who was an Essene teacher of Jesus. So yeah, I mean, you know, religiously, they leave out the whole, you know, early half of Jesus' life, but that exists, and there are books that detail that. It's just the religion wants to create this tightly woven narrative that supports their whole, you know, agenda. But in reality, there's many books talking about Jesus. and some of them are leave the story open to, because they're conflicting stories. Other books detail his early life, his learning, because they don't want you to understand that Jesus was human. He was a human being. He was not different than us. He was just a very evolved, advanced soul, maybe one of the most advanced we've seen on this planet. I mean, but the reality is that he's not fundamentally different. That's truth. I mean, that's reality. And people want to say, oh no, he's different. We're these lowly sinful beings and Jesus was perfect. That's nonsense. That's just religious garbage. And the whole point of them suppressing all this other teachings about Jesus is for that reason, is that they don't want you to realize that Jesus had to learn, he had to study, and that there were other wise people, and he had teachers, and he had to come to his own, understanding through, trial and error and learning and education and all that. So he was a teenager, he was a young man, and he studied with the Essenes. So there's a teacher of Jesus, many truths about Jesus himself, his personality, his background, his life, and times he lives are revealed in this fascinating account of the teacher who describes her personal relationship with Jesus in loving detail. So she published a book called They Walk with Jesus, and it describes the past life of two women who accompanied Jesus throughout different periods of his life, giving tremendous insight and detail into who he was as a person. So this goes on a little while. Like, there's a lot to her life. She is a very important character that's not widely known. So these beings, or this being, or this consciousness, was teaching Dolores and what's really fascinating, because I read about this, she would regress different people and the same being would come through, not really a being, but a consciousness, and continue her education through many different people. That's completely fascinating. And again, there are people who are alive today who do this technique, who have, I don't know personally, but they completely validate it, So it's not like something one and done, Dolores did it and now we can never repeat it. Like, people are doing it right now. And they do this for a living. You can pay people to regress you into past lives through Dolores's techniques. And I want to do that. I don't have the money, it's expensive, but I do want to do that. And I'd love to learn it as well. So they were teaching her. I'm not going to read all of this. And she learned about the nature of time and space and humanity. Nostradamus contacts Dolores, and apparently in this one he's speaking to her directly from where he's at in his time, because time is not linear in the way we think it is. So, which is fascinating. And she wrote about Nostradamus, and he clarified many of his quatrains for her, because their interpretations were off according to this entity calling himself Nostradamus. I'm just putting, disclaimer, like, I can only say what it says. I don't necessarily believe anything. I it has to be. In any case, it doesn't matter whether I do it or not. This is what it is. Yeah, so Nostradamus contacted her, and she wrote a book about all his, his predictions and clarifications, all of it. Then she started, there seemed to be themes, like just different eras in her life that were dominated by different themes. She began to bring back UFO abductees, and they would tell her all about the UFO phenomenon and why they were bringing her back. And apparently it was, according to her, it was an agreement that they would make in between lives, like the soul would make that with the alien beings to be abducted, and it's multiple. It can happen through generations. certain bloodlines, certain families would get abducted, and their children would be abducted, and grandchildren, like that. She talks about the gray aliens, how they are like a robot, that the little grays are like a robot clone species made by taller grays, who are the master race of these little grays. And there's a lot of stuff I'm just skipping over for time's sake. A lot about aliens and UFOs and all of that. Describes a life where a woman is regressed back in time to a spaceship crashed in Alaska, Canada region thousands of years ago. It is the story of the origin of the Indian races in America. Fascinating stuff, whether you believe it or not, or whether you believe it partially, or it doesn't matter. I mean, it's still really interesting. I think, the way people are like very black and white about like what they'll willing to accept and what they're not. It's like they either 100% believe in something or they fully reject it. And I don't think that's a healthy way to think. I think a really healthy way to think is to take in information and you weigh it based on its plausibility. How likely is this to be real? 50%, 80%, 99%, 0.1%, like that. And then so you that way you can remain open, and it's sort of like a puzzle piece. We don't know everything, and some things we just keep in the back of our mind and say maybe, but I don't know. And then when you get more information, you can say, okay, well, I'm putting those together, and that sort of makes sense, and now I kind of believe it, or I kind of don't believe it, and like that. It's really good to be open and just be like, have your reservations there, but at the same time, don't reject. So that's the way I think, and that's why I can look at all this and not fully take it on and believe it, everything, or disbelieve it. Well, it's like interesting. Maybe maybe her mind is getting in there and altering some of the details, some of the facts, some of the things. There's wishful thinking, of course, but then she writes these books that go really, really deep into woo-woo stuff, UFOs, extraterrestrials, and more like the nature of the universe. The Convoluted Universe series, where it's really, time and dimensions and space, and it gets into mind-bending stuff. Alternate realities, lost civilizations, ancient histories, Earth mysteries, Bermuda Triangle, Stonehenge, Loch Ness. And these are all things that she's being taught through these regressions by these people, by this consciousness that's coming through. Many different people. Reality is merely a holograph. Non-human bodies. And by the way, she has tons of videos on YouTube. So if you're curious about her, go look her up. I mean, I watched tons of videos on her. She's fascinating. Really, really wonderful, sweet lady, great to listen to. Then she talks about the 3 waves of volunteers who come in through this time because the earth needs help. So volunteers from throughout the universe that is, apparently brought in through like the God source and I don't know, these council of, spirits or aliens or whatever. Not sure, but doesn't matter. The 3 volunteers, the first generation, second generation, third generation, and you can look that up, and that's to help the earth transition into the new its new evolutionary phase. And she wrote about it. And the journey continues. This is her daughter who teaches and carries on her teachings, and Julia, she's her daughter. She's riding on her coattails, but she likes to, she wants to take on a lot of the credit that her mom gained. She's not really. I mean, she is what she is. I don't really think much of Julia Cannon, but she likes to think of herself as something special, sort of like her mom, whatever. In any case, now let's look at the astrology. I'm sorry if that was a little bit of a long intro, but that's the best I could get at. All right. So she's got a 8th house stellium in Aries, exalted sun in Aries. She's got a lot of high dignity planets, very dignified chart, very strong chart. Exalted sun in Aries, conjunct by 9 degrees Uranus and North Node, 10 degrees. So 8th house is that very powerful, deep house, great for any sort of mystical woo-woo type stuff, occultism, and it's worth knowing that it's basically conjunct the sun anyways, conjunct the 9th house cusp in Aries. But if we look at the going all the way back to the moon at 0 degrees, it's 8th flowing into the 9th. And so the 8th house definitely deals with that hidden quality, the secrets, bringing people into the hypnotized state, hypnosis, because it's that hidden quality, right? And right away we might as well take note that Mars is in Leo, Sun's in Aries, so the 8th and the 12th houses are energetically trading places, and there's a mutual reception between the Sun and Mars, so that's even strengthening it further, right? So, and 8th and 12th, so now it's like hypnosis going really, really deep into like the mystical and the spiritual and all the hidden secrets and the past lives and the subconscious. It's all merging. These powerful water houses are really prominent for her work and for her understanding. So that's really, really unique and powerful. I mean, the sun's already exalted here, but the mutual reception, it's not by degree, 24 and 4, but it is by sign. So it's still powerful, and the sun's already exalted in Aries, and the sun and Mars are quite good together, generally speaking. That's why the sun is exalted in Mars' sign of Aries. Uranus greatly enables her, enhances her ability to think outside the box, to be open to really expansive ideas and ideologies, makes her more revolutionary. Aries is groundbreaking. Aries is that initiator, that the sign that really wants to start things, new things, right? And especially with this mutual reception between Mars and Sun, that she's, her ability to initiate and to go into the new areas is really strong, especially when it's in the 8th house and 12th house related themes. So like full somnambulism, past lives, and all the spiritual woo stuff. And Uranus is highly progressive. Uranus really likes to break ground and be, completely on its own in unknown territory, and especially in Aries, that's very, very strong, especially with the North Node here as well, and Moon. I mean, this is very powerful 8th house, right? And its ruler Mars then is getting strengthened by the connection to the Sun. And Mars in Aries, or Mars in Leo is not great, but not terrible. It's fairly neutral, but this mutual reception strengthens it a lot. Sun is ruling the 12th house. Mars is ruling the 8th house. Well, I mean, if you look at this cusp, it's Jupiter, but most of the 8th house is in Aries. And the cusp actually is in Cancer, but if we look at that, then the moon is still in the 8th house. So either way you look at it, yeah, that's the case. 8th and 12th house strong. She's got a Virgo ascendant at 0 degrees with Neptune here. And for anything mystical, woo-woo, spiritual, Neptune very much helps. And it's a good thing that she was a conservative, traditional Midwestern housewife, because Neptune conjunct the ascendant obviously can relate to drugs and alcohol. Not that she couldn't be an alcoholic. I mean, drugs are definitely going to be harder to find in the 50s and, well, not 60s, but in any case, it's good that she didn't get into drugs and alcohol, because that would have messed up a lot of her ability to tap into these things and to do her work. Otherwise, Neptune is highly conducive to all sorts of spiritual, mystical type stuff, right? It could be good for anything creative, acting, music, things of that nature, glamorous, but she's obviously taking it on the more spiritual, mystical side of things. So that's very strong for her. Her MC's in Taurus, and Mercury and Chiron are here. Mercury is the ascendant lord, so going right into the 9th house, but approaching the 10th house. So philosophy, religion, mysticism. Well, mysticism would more be 8th house, but 8th moving into the 9th, 8th and 9th. So connection to religion, philosophy, God, spirituality, that sort of thing. And it's also very prominent in the sky, high in the sky. And let's see, Mercury in Taurus, it's fine, but it's conjunct Chiron. So Chiron definitely relates to, obviously wounds and rejection, but weird oddities, weird things, science fiction type stuff, and in its higher expression, healing and teaching, even astrology and sort of shamanism. So there's a mystical quality as well to Chiron. And her techniques actually are used for healing. It's quantum healing technique, where you go back to the issue in the past life and you resolve it there. And often, I mean, there's many documented cases of her healing people that couldn't be healed in any other way. You just go back to the source of the problem, and you address it there, bring it to the consciousness, and then there's healing there. So Chiron strongly relates to that. Chiron's the wounded healer. Mercury is the ascendant lord in the 9th house. So spiritual healing very much relates to that. Venus is ruling the MC and dispositing the Mercury and Chiron. Venus is exalted in the 7th house in Pisces. Right, so Venus and Pisces, her relationship, this is her husband, but also her one-on-one hypnosis clients, right? So her ability to, Pisces is that Neptunian quality, the spirituality, the mysticism, and Venus is joy, also her career, and her what she loves doing, what she enjoys doing, her creativity. So there's a lot of Venus in Pisces is sort of like a unconditional love. It's all embracing kind of love. So there, it's very nice to see this here. She's a very loving, compassionate person who is also very mystical and spiritual. Jupiter is ruling the 7th house. That's going to the 11th house, and that's conjunct Pluto, which is really interesting as well, because if you take Jupiter to be the 7th house lord, which it is, it's conjunct Pluto. And what happened to her husband? Hit by a drunk driver and paralyzed and amputee. So that's Pluto. Pluto is also that ability to think really deeply. And Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. So her wisdom, her philosophy is becoming very heart-centered, loving, caring, compassionate, and exalted, good dignity. But it's also going very, very deep into Pluto's the most deep. Pluto is the deeply spiritual planet, along with Uranus and Neptune. These are all outer planets. It's psychological, it's hypnosis. Pluto's the planet that you would look to most for hypnosis, as well as eighth house, because that's the psychology, it's the penetrating psychology, it's the dominating. Because in order to hypnotize somebody, you have to kind of dominate them. You have to dominate their mind and break through the conscious ego holds on their mind and go into the universal mind, getting deeper into the unified mind, the subconscious, the unity, the ocean of consciousness, right? So Pluto here is doing both of those things. It's hurting her husband, even though her husband was probably a really good guy with Venus and in Pisces, exalted Venus and exalted Jupiter, both represent the kind of partners in her husband as well. But the Pluto shows some very destructive element as well for her husband. But it also relates to bringing those people into that hypnosis state, deep in there, and really psychologizing in a very deep way. And it also, at the same time, represents her own belief systems. Jupiter represents our own philosophy, our own understanding of life. So Pluto is taking it really deep, really psychological. Now she's like, the convoluted, she's written these fantastic books. I mean, just, have a look at the convoluted universe. It's like, it's like, twisting your mind into a pretzel, according to, I mean, that's what it says on her website. But it's very, very, very deep, very confounding. It really does twist your mind into pretzels. So, I mean, that's quite fascinating. Jupiter is also sextile her Mercury. So that's, really good for her ability to write and speak about it, because Mercury is the expression. It's also her ascendant lord, and it's basically the 10th whole sign house as well, 11th cusp. So that's very good there. Venus is trine this Pluto, and Jupiter is involved by conjunction, and that's really healthy as well. Very good ability to relate. These are, the clients are going into the Jupiter Pluto conjunction, which is, that very deep psychological hypnosis state. 11th house is career success and hopes, wishes, dreams. But it also shows that it's a very big, the 11th house is a very big mindset, because it's dealing with society, all the people, big picture things. It's a little more concrete than the 12th house, right? You're still, 12th house is total expansion, but illusory, and you can get confused. Dissolution in the 12th house. 11th house is very big, even into outer space, right? Thinking about, very, very vast things in the 11th house, but it's more concrete, less creative and imaginative. Okay. Let's see here. There's this square. Oh, yes. Also Jupiter's square the nodes. And that is and then Pluto gets tied in there just by proximity, by conjunction. When a planet is square the nodes, it can indicate certain events that happen, certain destined events that happen along the way, because it's midway. It's a point, it's a friction point between the past and the future, right? So something happened along the way. right? And that's this Jupiter, Pluto in the 11th in Cancer. And so that relates to her husband's accident, and it also relates to her fortuitous falling into the whole hypnosis thing. She was the first. It was like, she was chosen for this. It was destined, you could say. I mean, it's clear. It's very clear. I mean, there was nobody else who did it before her. She did it, and she brought it. She wrote many books, and she became famous for it. So that has to do with that. That's very prominent because Jupiter's ruling the 7th house. It's also ruling the fifth cusp, but I mean, this is the 4th whole sign house, but the 5th cusp. So perhaps having to do with children as well. In any case, we do have an exalted Saturn. Sorry, not an exalted. In domicile Saturn in Capricorn. Very good dignity here in the 5th house, and that relates to her children. Julia Cannon is the one who really took over her work, and kind of like, I don't know, there's something a bit weird about Julia, which I don't particularly like, and that could be described by this square between the Sun and Saturn, both in really good dignity. But because this is in the 5th house and ruling most of the 5th house, 6th cusp, but 5th whole sign house. So that does relate to Julia. So I mean, she's doing a good job, as I guess, as far as like carrying her mother's work forward. But it's sort of like she's using her mother's credentials to elevate herself and sort of take on the same credit that her mother had as sort of like some sort of spiritual teacher. Because Dolores, even though she was gathering her information from her clients, there was something very, very wise and teacherly about her, which is also described by Saturn in the 5th, because the 5th house is education, and it's a very visible, confident house to have a planet in. It relates to children, relates to entertainment, fun games, romance, but performance as well, and being on stage. So she talked a lot in front of crowds, and so Saturn here would give her a lot of authority and respect as a teacher, as an educator, as a leader, as well as Jupiter in Cancer, Venus in Pisces here, exalted Sun in Aries. I mean, she really has a lot of strong dignity in her planets. And this is the one, not the one, but it's not that bad, because both of these planets are in really strong on their own. I guess the one problem would be Saturn is debilitated by Aries, so not so good for this Saturn, this square. But yeah, I see the main thing I see that is somehow Julia, that becomes somewhat of an irritation to those who appreciate the teachings of Dolores Cannon, and I don't know, at least maybe it's just me, that's the way I feel. I'm not really, any case, it's just my opinion, but there's some issue between the Sun and Saturn, some square. It's hard work. Squares usually indicate hard work. Saturn to the Sun can be very restrictive, limiting. I'm not sure how this is, because I don't know her personality well enough, but Sun and Saturn definitely don't get along very well. So there's some restriction here, some maybe relationship with her father wasn't so good, relationship with authorities. She might have gotten into trouble with certain authority figures, government. It's ruling the 5th and 6th whole sign house, Saturn is. So conflict, could be conflict, especially with our children. Any case. There could have been trouble with various powers that be and authorities, and maybe she was getting too into secret things that she shouldn't have been. I don't know, but I think there was probably some trouble at various points of her life, but I don't think it was major because our planets are so strong, right? Mars is also ruling the 4th, the IC, the 4th cusp, and so that describes a lot of travel, foreign things, which she did in her early life, moving around a lot with her husband. South node in the 2nd house in Libra, so the early half of her life was very concerned with security and family, resources, things of that nature, just being good, good relationships in Libra and security and all that. And then obviously North Node in Aries in the 8th house was about her developing her mystical hypnosis techniques, conjunct Uranus there. Very strong, very powerful, as far as Uranus is all about diving into the anything that's really new and progressive and unique and technological or mystical, or anything that's just totally progressive and new and scientific or inventive or just novel, just anything that's into the unknown. That's sort of Uranus. And it sort of looks like Uranus, the symbol, the glyph for Uranus sort of looks like the Star Trek ship. So, going where no man has gone before, or woman, that's sort of Uranus, especially in Aries. Uranus in Aries really wants to break ground. It really wants to go into the unknown. And in the 8th house, that's hidden secret things, and especially with North Node, it's really strong here, this combination for going into mystical, hidden, occult things. All right. What else is there? I mean, this is a really strong chart, especially for the mystical woo-woo sort of phenomenon. And she really went deep into that whole rabbit hole. And so that's quite interesting. I highly recommend you go look her up on YouTube if you're not familiar with her yet. Let's just take a brief look at her draconic chart. It's going to be very similar, off by 15 degrees, 14 being exact. Saturn's the same. Venus is still exalted here. Moon is directly over Venus in Pisces. And that's more confirmation. Moon in the 7th makes a very good counselor, very good for caring for others. Pisces is still that mystical quality, right? So this is people probably really loved her because of that compassionate, caring nature that she has. This sweet old lady that is full of wisdom and care and love, and it's probably really nice to have to work with her and to be hypnotized by her. These are still in the 8th house in Aries. Not much difference there. Mercury moves into Aries. Okay. MC is right over that Mercury. That's really good for public recognition and whatnot. Not too different from where it is natally. Jupiter moves into Gemini, where it's losing dignity, but Jupiter's ruling the 7th house. So her husband, it's still conjunct Pluto, right? So that is interesting, right? Her husband's in a wheelchair, paralyzed. Also, the 7th Lord can tell the quality of the people that you attract, And if the seventh lord or planets in the seventh house are not in good dignity, that means you're attracting people who are weak, who need help, who are potentially sick. And so she did. So like, even though her Jupiter is exalted here in Cancer and natally, she's bringing people to her that need help, that are sick, basically, a lot of times, who want to resolve some certain issues. So that really speaks to that, this Jupiter in Gemini. You know, I've seen this before, like counselors who really help people, help sick people and stuff. They'll have, you know, something like that, a debilitated planet in the seventh. Obviously, it can go the other way, where that person could take advantage of other people. You know, so there's always, you know, with debilitated planets or planets in exaltation, it can go two different ways. Right? It's not always good or not always bad either. Depends on a lot of things. And then here, Mars is in Cancer, right above Pluto. Mars is not in good dignity. Mars is debilitated in Cancer, exalted in Capricorn, obviously. But again, we're saying that's a repetition of the same theme. Mars might even represent the car accident, right? Because it's so close to this it's very close to this Pluto. Mars and Pluto together can be quite destructive. And Jupiter is the seventh house ruler. So that's interesting as well. The draconic chart is showing the negative, a little bit more negative quality to her husband and her clients. You know, not in a bad way, just that they, you know, her husband obviously hit by a drunk driver, paralyzed, and then a lot of her clients need help, have issues, right? And that's, you know, the rest is, it's not worth commenting on. That's it for Dolores Cannon, guys. Can't really think of anything else. South Node is ruled by Venus. Venus is in the seventh house. So obviously in the first half of life, her marriage was much more important. Second half of life, Aries, so eighth house, and then disposited by Mars in the 12th, so 8th, 12th. It's going to be much more prominent and towards her mission, because also Sun and Moon are here as well, right? South Node, she's opposite her Sun and Moon, so it's really not about her in their first half of life. Second half of life, she becomes very activated by the North Node and exalted Sun and Moon, Uranus. Hold on. Okay, that's pretty much it. One more thing, her Mercury is pretty slow. That shows a strong intellect, strong ability to think. It's 24 degrees. That's pretty slow for the Mercury. Not the slowest, but definitely a slow Mercury. And that means just being able to think more deeply and more thoroughly about things. You know, a slow Mercury is not going to be they're going to take their time thinking. They're going to have to think a long time about things, but very penetrating. And it can also represent certain skills, because Mercury is a very skillful planet. Rules Gemini. All right, that's it. Guys, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment down below if you like. Book a reading with me, macroastrology.com. That's my website. macrogoldmachine@yahoo.com is my email address. So reach out to me. And I will see you again soon. Thanks.